Hello, welcome to Surgeons of Horror. I'm your host, Saul Muerte, and I'm joined once again by the esteemed Oscar Jack. Welcome aboard, Oscar.
Hello, Saul. Thank you. Thank you
Good to
for
have
the
you for
wonderful
this one.
introduction.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, look, this is we have done audio commentaries before in the past in our podcast, but only sparingly, and it seemed quite fitting that this one in particular that we're about to do is one that we should delve into and watch the visual spectacular that it is as we run our audio kind of commentary over the top of it. And that is because it's Nosferatu, which is celebrating 100 years of its release this year. Can't believe that, but the film does still stand up, and that is what I want us to kind of look at and scrutinize and put this one under the knife as we watch it unfold. So for those that are tuning into this podcast as they would normally and are listening to our audio only version that's available on all podcasting platforms, there is an option to watch the movie as it unfolds. Now, we are taking this one from the Blu-ray HD remastered version, and we are going to play that in due course. And when we do kind of start playing the movie, we'll let you know, and then you can kind of start watching it in time with us if you would like to at home. So before we kind of start delving in, I probably should just ask you, Oscar, have you seen this movie before, or is this the first time you're venturing into this?
This will be my first full proper view.
Yeah.
I remember incredibly vividly year 8 English, looking at film and horror in particular. We looked at Psycho, but we also looked at this in just a really mangled way where we just watched like snippet scenes.
Sure.
Instead of sitting through the entire, thing, which might have been a lot to ask of a room full of year 8s.
Yeah.
But it definitely imprinted. It's funny actually, because the imagery, and I'll get to it like when we get to it.
Yeah.
But some of the imagery of this movie in the small amounts that we had made an impact on us.
Okay.
In a certain way. It was like, it almost became a bit of a meme for us.
Sure.
But it was very, which is interesting in of itself.
Yes.
That shows that that you're working with some this is influential. This is influential imagery.
It definitely is. It definitely
beginning of a long line.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think that's why it still, as I said, stands up. There's lots of iconic imagery that we'll get to when we get to seeing this in its full glory as we kind of start talking through the piece. But yeah, look, I found it from my point of view. It's weird. I don't ever recall when I first see these or watch these movies. I kind of almost feel like I came into it quite late. I was aware of it, but I think my first memory of it is from a movie in the could have been like the mid 90s, and it was called Killing Zoe. And there are clips of this film in that film, which is kind of, I think one of the guys is kind of watching it and he keeps seeing these images pop up, and I remember the Max Schreck Count Orlok figure is so kind of iconic, and that's the bit that kind of used and hauntingly so it was kind of, it stuck in my mind then, and I think that then made me curious about I need to actually watch this in its full, and I think off the back of that went and found a copy. So that was my introduction to it. But I do wonder if people out there, like we're saying, this is 100 years old. Why are we talking about something that's 100 years old? Why is it so iconic? And that's hopefully what I want Oscar and myself to kind of pick apart as we go through and watch the film. So I think we'll start playing it now, because I think if we get too deep down into this, we're going to be talking a bit too much around it before we've even kind of jotted it along. So the purpose of this, as I said, audio listeners out there, if you've got a copy of your Nosferatu, once again, we are watching this off the Blu-ray HD version. And if you have a copy of that, feel free to dig it out, stick it on otherwise, I mean, we're watching this on YouTube. It is one of those films that fell into the public domain. So it is kind of readily accessible. And you could probably find said film clip that we are watching this from in order to share this in a very I guess modern way. It's a very post-COVID way where we can kind of share some of these thoughts from across the states, because I'm sitting in in the Blue Mountains, which is north of Sydney in Australia, and Oscar is in Melbourne, which is down in the state of Victoria, which is a state that's just a bit lower down than New South Wales, where I'm speaking from. So yeah, let's get into this. Let's start watching this. So I'm going to press play now. So like the first caption we're seeing at the moment is saying best classics, public domain films in best quality. And I will press play now. And we have it unfolding as we speak. And we get the big iconic Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror, which I think is very good. It just very quickly glimpsed through there. I mean, the credits are going quite quickly, but it just quickly glossed over the fact that it was based on the novel, Dracula by Bram Stoker. I wonder if that was the speed it went with the original release. I don't know. Because
I mean, that's the trouble that you have with the whole. I mean, that's maybe the biggest thing you kind of have to talk about after the imagery of this film.
Yes, that's exactly right. So like, it's infamously was sued by the Stoker or the heirs of the Stoker estate for its plagiarism.
I believe it was his wife. I mean, at the time,
his wife. That's right. I think you're right.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy to think about. That the novel was written in the life. You know, this book that seems so ancient. It's the handover of it all.
The handover of it all. That's right. So we just got saying it was Act 1, an account of the great death of Weisborg, Anno Domini 1838. And we're about to kind of open up with, as was in those days, the captions that would come up. This is saying, Nosferatu, does this word not sound like the death bird calling your name at midnight? Beware, you never say it. For then the pictures of life will fade to shadows, haunting dreams will climb forth from your heart and feed on your blood. Often the case in these old films, we get a lot of this kind of backstory stuff, exposition built up in the first few kind of captions that come up. We're now presented with the next bit where it says, I have reflected at length on the origin and passing of the great death in my hometown of Weisborg. Here is its story. Once in Weisborg lived a man named Hutter and his young wife Ellen.
It's quite interesting that with the
I love that show.
The setting, this like with the whole setting of this, that I like watching the early language of cinema develop.
Yes.
With the transition of, you know, you'd have your narrator or your barker come out the front and say, "Listen up, this is the story that we're about to see."
Yeah.
And you still have that transitioning over there. As a seeing the
that's true. Actually, as a visual medium of the time, that was pretty much set up with like essentially the silent era that we're watching at the moment. One thing I just want to touch on is the film Shadow of a Vampire, which, have you seen that, Oscar?
I have it on DVD on my shelf. I have not watched it. I've heard
maybe this will give you the impetus to kind of go off of that shot there. But yeah, maybe we'll give you the impetus to go and watch it, because that opening scene where we see the Hutter character, I want to say he's played by Gustav von Wangenheim. I'm going to make sure I've got the right credit in a second. But he is played by Eddie Izzard in the film Shadow of a Vampire, and he does it just as camp. And it's hard not to see that version when I now watch this. Yeah, very, very cool. But this Hutter character is basically the Harker character, Hutter Harker character from Stoker, his version. And we see his wife in this stage is Greta, as opposed to the Mina character. When I say Mina, I mean Mina, not Mina as in they're really mean and angry.
Nasty.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that character there, is he meant to be the Van Helsing type? Anyway, I think. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So this is also aligning things to the fact that he works, as in the Hutter character works in the estate industry, housing estate industry, and he's off to go to work there. It's interesting. Who's this? Is this the Renfield character? No.
Which is interesting to kind of pick apart, because like all of the characters look so creepy.
They do.
Like even before we've gotten to like even our like main two characters, there's something about that heightened German expressionistic language of the hair and the makeup and definitely the just is like, I mean, they're going out, they're setting the tone before they even have like the true horror of this, because it's a symphony of horror.
It is a symphony of horror. I love the fact that it's described that way too, because it is. They're playing with the senses and very much. And this is the first time we get introduced to the name Count Orlok. Sorry, on the screen.
Yeah. So this is the boss.
This is
the real
big
estate
boss. Yeah, that was a funny look. So I should probably touch on here that this film was directed by Frederick Wilhelm Murnau, and so yes, and it was released, as I said, in 1922. He was a guy that actually was friends with Max Reinhardt, and it was during World War One that he worked with the German army and the infantry company there, and a lot of what he observed during that time had a great impact on his outlook. And I think you kind of see a lot of that coming through, the dark kind of energy coming through in his work. And he would go on to direct, I want to say he directed the film Sunrise, which was one of the early Oscar contenders in 1927 as well. So, so that was a big film moment as well. So if you haven't seen that one, definitely go check that out.
Yeah, I feel like I've got quite a big gap in my very early cinematic repertoire, though I have been able to the Astor Theatre down here, they were hosting, I think a few other places did as well, the Gothel Institute had been hosting a lot of rescoring of a lot of the old German expressionistic films like The Golem and Nosferatu, where they had a live band playing this kind of reimagined score, which was really cool, really it's such a fun thing to do with these films that have now fallen into the public domain, is to watch what the public do with them, which I think is the sad thing about the kind of corporatization of like the Disney of it all, of holding on for dear life for their properties as the country is reaching its own kind of 100 years.
That's very true, Oscar. Like there's a lot there, and the way streaming has gone as well, and each of these film studios are now branching off and having their own streaming platforms to keep that control, which it's hard. Being a film reviewer, I find that hard because you want to have access to some other lesser known titles that don't get elevated as much to the fore, I do at least, because I'm a cinephile at heart. You know, I wanna watch these things like we're talking about.
And
you were talking about
discover
yeah,
discover them as well. You know,
exactly.
that's the joy of being like, oh my god, have you seen this thing? I found it in a bargain bin. You know, like or at a
yeah.
You're like, this thing I've never heard of.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it, and that's right, and that's kind of, I think that's kind of missing a little bit, unfortunately, these days. I'm showing my age now, clearly, but yeah, I mean, I'm still very much about the physical form of watching movies. I've got countless DVDs and Blu-rays, but it's mainly because of that. It's not. I know we're in a digital age, and I'm more than happy to stream stuff and watch stuff. But there's something about if there's a certain film that you love, having a physical copy of that to then kind of watch whenever you want to watch it. Yeah,
100%. I mean, this really, the novel of Dracula is such an incredible, massive hit.
Yes.
Obviously, you know, sweeps across the world. That you have these filmmakers in Germany be like, okay, let's just make a movie of it and switch the names. This, like, because even the play, like because this is, you know, so early in the days of horror, you still, you know, you have not too far after this, you have, you know, you're starting to get the Universal stuff coming out. The, you know, I'm not sure whether the original Phantom of the Opera adaptation, I think was prior after this.
Yeah.
But you actually have the Dracula play, that Bela Lugosi originated. That comes out 2 years after this.
Yeah.
So that's how kind of like hot on. I don't know whether that was their own kind of spurring of like, we got to start making some extra money off this. Bela Lugosi is the one who kind of originates that role and grows from that. And the whole, the wave of horror. Just this is like the butterfly wings that like sets. I don't know if it necessarily sets it into motion, but it's the signal turn. It's a strong kind of show of what's going to come and be one of the most successful and dominant and enduring genres of all time for film.
Well, that's exactly right, and like you can see that. Like one of the earliest short films was Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Like it's only about 6 or 7 minutes long. As a short feature, like 1910, I want to say off the top of my head, that came out. So already we're seeing how horror has a huge play when it comes to the celluloid form. And as you said, this film comes out and it looks at the German filmmakers at the time, look at what was a hot property novel, Bram Stoker's film. Nobody had made it before. Why not go out and try and make it? And I think, as you were I think if I'm right reading you properly, the way you're implying it is that off the back of making this film, Hollywood then suddenly realized that there was something more that they could kind of go on to do, and with great success. They probably were damning the fact that they didn't get there first. But then, like you said, this is only like 9 years. 1931 was when the feature-length Bela Lugosi film came out. So it's 9 years after this. And Lugosi made the part Dracula his own, and equally as iconic in a very different way. Like the feature, like I think that's where the deviations are clearly seen in both films, because the Lugosi one sticks very closely to how Stoker writes the character of Count Dracula, because he comes across as a gentleman figure, whereas this is very much a beast of non-humankind creature that we see in Count Orlok. And we've yet, like, what were we, like 13 minutes in, we haven't seen him yet.
But a lot of kind of myth making around it. The piece of paper that the boss is looking at is like covered in like hieroglyphics, and like it looks like a page ripped straight from the Necronomicon. It does, which I would have no doubt was probably an influence when they were designing that. Like possibly, this is the village. We just had our villagers scene of all of them freaking out that he's going to see this. Yeah. see this, folk.
I mean, even like, that alone, it's the whole, the locals, like, again, I'm thinking Eddie's Odd, it's that whole, like, people from round here don't talk from, like, people from round here, because they're always Cornish people, that kind of, But yeah, it's like this whole kind of, the villagers kind of. One thing I love about the silent era is that the acting had to be larger than life and expressive because they couldn't rely on sound. And you see some wonderful performance. Just then, we just saw these women huddled together, and you can see the way that they interact with one another, the fear that's coming off them. It's really, it's cool. Really cool. Vampires of Terrible Phantoms and the 7 Deadly Sins. Okay. I kind of missed this earlier. Sorry, I got distracted. This is where we first get the word Nosferatu.
The vampire Nosferatu, and Nosferatu as the name of the creature, as the what this thing is a Nosferatu.
Yes, that's right.
Which is it's good. Like this is good stuff. I know it's not a terribly hot take, but like Dracula, it's a good story. It's a good story.
It is a very good story. Like we're talking about Dracula. So while we're waiting for this, because all of this is like the scene, we're still watching Hunter as he's about to embark on his way to Olot's castle on his domain. But let's talk about Bram Stoker's novel for a moment. I'm guessing you have read it before.
No, I haven't. Okay. No, so I read I haven't read the actual novel, but I have read one of the first books I read was like a young adult simplified version.
Sure. Yeah.
That was like shorter and just like for like young teens.
Yeah.
And so I read that one in a Frankenstein
version.
And which makes a lot of sense. I got it from my great aunt. She gave it to me and loved it. And that was the first. I was like, first books that I was kind of reading. With these 100-year-old stories.
Excellent. Yeah, like I think that's cool because like I have read it and I have read it a couple of times. And
I do just want to like draw attention. To this fellow who's woken up. He's had a good night. He sees the sun. He's realized that like, these people are crazy, and he literally laughs and throws the book of the 7 Deadly Sins and the vampire as he's down, which is so good. That's so funny.
It is great. It's so deliciously camp, his role. It's so good.
What was your first like introduction to the Dracula story? What was your like avenue into that?
Yeah, because I can't recall the very, very first instance, but I remember going to a fancy dress party when I was pretty young, and I went as Dracula. I was dressed as Dracula, so like the image was obviously embedded in my mind. I obviously had already developed a liking to the Gothic arts at that stage, and as I said, because I was very young, everyone else was going to dress as like Spider-Man and stuff, and there's me as Dracula. It wasn't even a Halloween thing, it was just a fancy dress party. But yeah, so I did have a love of it. I feel like my earliest image of Dracula, or maybe the first film I watched with Dracula, was Christopher Lee's Dracula. To me, he was Dracula, and then I think I came, or then I sat down and watched the Lugosi version later on. And I want to say I read the book before, and we talk about Frankenstein too, because they kind of come hand in hand in many ways as the pioneers of Gothic literature. of examples of Gothic literature, I should say. But yeah, like I think I definitely read the Dracula one first, and what's interesting about that, it's all done like as diary form, so like your or journals told from the main like 4 key characters, and which is, I really like that kind of way of telling it, but it's an interesting one because
epistolary.
Yes. Yes.
One of the few fragments of that year 8 class,
yes.
that year 8 English class, of being like, yeah, it's all about letters. Love that.
It is essentially, because
it's essentially it's found footage. It's a found footage horror.
It is exactly. Oh, look at that! Look at that shot. Where did they find that? Anyway, sorry. So I get really fascinated by architecture, and when I see like things like that, it's the sort of thing, if you're strolling along a mountainous range, you're just like, whoa, why was that built there? What purpose did this thing have?
I can answer straight to that, because I've got a handy little list of trivia.
Yeah.
That his abode is really Orava Castle in Slovakia.
Okay.
So this is the real, which might be the interior. But like a long abandoned Slovakian castle that's been decaying since the 1500s.
Wow.
Wow.
How awesome is that?
I mean, that's the great thing about filming in Europe, in most places, is it's so old. It's so like there's so much old architecture. There's castles everywhere.
Yeah. I'm just going to pause you there, because what we're watching there is the negative shot that they've done. They've done they've shot it and just kind of done the negative version of it.
Which is, they lost because I believe the one of the kind of consequences of the court cases around it was that all of the prints had to be destroyed.
That's right.
And so it was only secondary prints, second generation prints that survived. And so it was one of these things that, it's such a classic tale of like these prints that get lost because they're physical things, and they get destroyed by mold or fire or court cases.
Yes. Some of these survive. Here we get our first proper image, because we did see him as the coachman, but this is our first full image shot of him. Max Schreck is the gentleman that played Count Orlok, and played it so convincingly that people, extras in the cast, believed that he was a true vampire or a demon, which is what spurred on the Shadow of the Vampire idea, to kind of take that literally as gospel. So he was a bit like Max Schreck was very much like Lon Chaney, in the sense that method, but would really kind of do a lot to his physical features to change the way he looks on screen. But yeah, the book, so I remember the book, like as I was saying, for Stoker was really quite, I found it really, I remember my first memory of it, I found the medium really interesting. When I run a thing which I haven't touched on in a while, but it's the Library of the Occult. Dennis Wheatley's The Library of the Occult, as a bit of an aside, and it's trying to go through. Dennis Wheatley was a British writer who went on to write a lot of imagine James Bond style novels, like Ian Fleming's novels, but in the world of the occult, and he became quite famous for that, and because of that he got asked to kind of create a library so that a company would then go off and sell, like Roald Dahl did. Like they got him to do all these mystery books and stuff, or Alfred Hitchcock. Hey Alfred, I want you to commission these 20 books, and all we need you to do is write up a foreword and stuff. So there's a list of these books that I'm going to go through. And so Dracula's in there, Frankenstein's in there. So I reread it recently, and it's harder than getting into than I imagined. There are lots of bits that stagnate a little bit, but then when they start doing the chase sequence and trying to get down to meeting him and stuff, it gets a bit more. The pace of it picks up a lot more, and the tension. So this bit is something that carries on in various versions, where we see the blood. He cuts himself, and then the vampire reveals his true colors a little bit. It's still, and it's such an interesting, and I think it's one of the most interesting dynamics in horror. It's this struggle between civilization and society, and good manners, and the horrific. Yes, and which is, you know, constantly the thing that people are doomed by good manners. They are. Because society says, you know, that would be rude to leave. You might be freaking out like this guy is right now because your host just like leapt forward and said your precious blood and started sucking on your finger. Which, I mean, in some circles is totally fine and encouraged. But if you're not part of that party, then I guess it can be quite a lot. But it's the same. It's the same thing of like, you know, like Rosemary's Baby, you know, and Stepford Wives that comes in really big in kind of the 60s and 70s. Yeah. It's this thing that we kind of constantly like drifts between the horror of the utter unknown, which is generally when there's more horrors present. You know, we want a little bit more distant, but like, you know, those quiet, it's, you know, the horrors on our doorstep, you know, where we these are the choices that we make. And because we're not listening to our gut, we're not listening to, you know, we're not listening to the audience screaming, get out. It's just it's such an interesting dynamic, and you know, seeing that it has been something that has been kind of just present in the creative consciousness for so long. It has been. Like, it's interesting when you're talking about the Rosemary's Baby as well, because that was written by R11. R11. Famous. What made that book so famous was it was bringing the horror into suburbia, into the home, and that's the first time that had really ever been done, and that's what was so shocking and scary about it. So before that moment, we're talking more about these films here, like it's the otherworldly experience, like this gothic kind of things, like vampires, werewolves, and things like that. But when that movie, I'm saying the book obviously came first and made the impact, but when the movie came out, Polanski's version, that kind of just really resounded, and really made it quite scary. And then of course you get Spielberg coming along 5 years later and making the open area as scary again with Jaws. So very interesting kind of direction along the way. And as you said, horror finds new avenues all the time to scare and delight its audiences. He's still looking very happy and cheery, doesn't he, old Hutter, at this point? He had some maybe a nip on his neck, but you know, he's eating. It's lovely. He's well fed. He's a well fed man. Very important. I'll say that the in terms of like cinematic Draculas and cinematic vampires, I think that my first true exposure would probably have been Dracula Dead and Loving It. So Leslie Nielsen was my Dracula. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. With that far out. That's constantly so good. That's for me, that's constantly the lens that I watch every kind of Dracula story through. Wow. It's which I've watched so many times and legitimately was freaked out as a small child. There was a couple scenes that really freaked me out. And I think it was probably the ones that were kind of more sexual nature, with like the Brides of Frankenstein. Oh, yeah.
Coming up, of being like, not only the kind of the sexual, which is so ingrained in Dracula, it's the seduction, it's the, it's giving into the hunger, which so many, it's Wolfman, it's all of this, this
absolutely
this, there's but a thin veneer of civility between you and the horror.
Sorry, I was kind of looking at stuff in the background because I was trying to look up something, because you talking about Dracula over the ages reminded me that I wrote an article for the Surgeons of Horror guys called The Lure of Dracula, and it does, I just thought, I should kind of open that up, because I do talk about like the iconic films across the ages, and obviously the first big one is this one that we're talking about here, that we're watching with Nosferatu. But I'm having a quick look now down to see where. Okay, so then I go into Bela Lugosi's Dracula. Then Christopher Lee. 10 years after that, Christopher Lee. Sorry, that's completely wrong. 1958 was Christopher Lee's version of Dracula would come along, and the Hammer horror teams would then kind of generate their own version of Draculas along the way. I'm trying to think. Then we get who did that? I've got Blood of Dracula in here. Would come around the kind of 60s period, and you get the I Was a Teenage Werewolf. Then Polanski. We were talking about Polanski just a moment ago with Rosemary's Baby, but in 1967 he did a parody of the Hammer horror films and made the comedy film Fearless Vampire Killers, which came along too. And then we would get blaxploitation movement coming about. We'd get Blackula being made in the early 70s. Before 1970, I can't remember when it comes around, but we get Frank Langella as Dracula, 1979, something like that. And then you get Klaus Kinski's remake of this, Nosferatu Phantom der Nacht, would come around. And then when we get into the 80s, the next appearance of Dracula would be in the Monster Squad, which was equally as iconic, but then probably not until Francis Ford Coppola came around and did Bram Stoker's Dracula in the early 90s did we get a true representation or the most truest representation of the novel, with Gary Oldman hamming it up. This is no laughing matter.
This moment here is, this is like the poster. This is your poster. This is, him revealing his full ears. He's, the rabbit
this is
teeth.
Great.
I think the rabbit teeth are really freaky.
Yes.
God, he's so elongated and.
Yes. It's and like his fingernails as well, like the way his fingers are kind of pointy and stretched. And his ears have this like orc-like look to them.
This whole idea of like
she senses something.
Yeah, senses that it's like the whole thing of like the crew who discovered the Tutankhamun's tomb.
Yeah, yes.
I was like stuck in my head so much that the reports of the lead guy, his dog in London, crying out and howling, going nuts at the same time that he died in Egypt. This idea of space. Space is nothing. These
exactly.
moments of horror that resonate through the connections that can't be seen.
Yeah, I was watching her just then. The whole time she was walking on tiptoes. She got out of bed. She never put her whole feet down on the ground.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that caught my eye. I noticed that. And even then, when she was walking along, the
up on the like the banister.
The banister thing. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. This is where like German expressionism really comes in with the light, the use of light and shadow and stuff here. And we see the Count Orlok's shadow looming over Hutter. Very, very cool. Hutter! Yeah, that.
It's like his face looks like a bat.
It does, yeah.
That he can even sense that connection.
And the hooked nose too, man. You can sense her too from beyond.
And like, I mean, yeah, the door just closing. I mean, like,
the door's great. That arch shape as well just perfectly frames his body. So cool.
Well, and it's also interesting that they don't have, I guess, don't have a Renfield character.
No.
Which is they've combined the two and had it so that he kind of escapes. Escapes his, the subjugation of by the vampire. Yeah, and he's protected by his love, by Ellen. It's Harry Potter all over again. The love is protecting from the Voldemort.
Dwight Fry really made the 1931 version with his version of with Renfield. Like, I think it's some of the images he does and the way he reacts, and that is so good. Yeah,
and it's just such a fun. Well, we have Renfield's a really interesting character, and I think it's also, good timing that we have a Renfield film that is currently being made. I believe it's a part of like the dark, they're trying to do the dark universe again.
Yes,
they're trying to kick that off. It's someone really.
I'm looking it up as we're talking.
Yeah,
I remember Nicolas Cage is going to be
Dracula
in it.
Amazing.
That's and then Renfield will be Nicholas Hoult.
Nicholas Hoult? Yeah. I've made. You know what? That sounds so incredible. I cannot wait. I can't wait for that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty great. I'm trying. And Chris McKay. I can't think who Chris McKay is, but Chris McKay is directing it.
Is directing it? Oh, so Chris McKay is the guy who. No, that's Adam McKay. Oh.
I'm going to look it up. He wrote. He did the Tomorrow War.
Oh, sure. Yeah, the Amazon.
The Lego Batman movie.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good movie. Lego Batman.
A lot to do with Robot Chicken.
Sure, right. So he's coming in. Stuff. I haven't seen the Tomorrow War. I heard things about it, but it sounds like he's got a good sense of humor.
Yes. Which might be interesting. Him working alongside Cage might be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, our boy's just having just a hell of a time. He's gone down. He's found his host in his coffin with his eyes wide open.
That's it. Oh god, he's not such a happy bunny anymore, is he? He's not staring off out the windows, giving himself a cold bath in the morning.
Oh wow, and he's watching like High Speed.
High Speed coffin stacking.
Yeah, stacking.
I love it. Oh, and he climbs in, doesn't he? Oh, and
close us up.
Stop animation at its best.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, and because they've set this whole thing up, that is actually maybe even it's different. It certainly adds so much more of a ticking clock immediately, because in the original it's like it's slow and methodical, and it's it's Renfield, like he's taking his time getting over, whereas this one, like Olaf, the Nosferatu, has like seen the picture of his wife and has commented she has a very lovely neck. Perfectly
he's
normal
not very
thing
subtle,
to
is
say.
he?
No. It's like it's absolutely, it's a zombie saying like their brain is beautiful and juicy. And so Nosferatu's left him locked up, and he's
Yeah.
So it's a race back to protect his love.
Yes, and this bit's kind of in keeping too, because I like the idea of the novel. I mean, in the fact that we do get this sense of always trying to chase after or get ahead of where Dracula is, and always being that slightly bit behind. And these are the guys transporting the coffins down the river. I remember this shot. That's kind of cool. I like that. And we're into end of Act 2. This is where, okay, so this is in the novel. This would be the Harker character being back into life again by the nunnery. We found him in the novel. There's a sister of some kind who is praying over his soul.
It's very engrossing.
It is. It really is. So you can tell we've gone a little bit silent here because we're just kind of caught up with what was going on the screen just then.
And I feel like there's, I mean, it's such the kind of tied trope of people kind of ragging on on old styles of acting, whether it's 50s, 40s, 20s, or even like 80s, or there's always this kind of these kind of cultural shifts in what a good performance is happens, and just what kind of is in the fashion. But I mean, there's a lot of bad acting, but that's always true. Yes. We look back at the 90s, or the 80s had incredible movies. It's but we don't talk about 95% of them because there's so much crap. Yeah. And it's the good stuff that rises, there's good stuff that sticks around.
And you might differ. I don't know how you feel about this particular movie I'm going to mention, but I'm in the middle of watching Beware the Blob. So it's Larry Hagman's.
Which one's that?
It's Larry Hagman directed it. And it was 1972, and I'm watching it because I every year I do a bit of a retrospective, so I kind of look at all the films that are coming of age, and this is a particular that are in the horror genre, and this particular movie is going to be turning 50 this year. So I'm in the middle of watching it, and it is so painful. It's really quite bad, and I know The Blob is deliberately B movie horror, right? But it's like the next level down. It's not good B movie horror. Let's put it this way.
Which is its own these own. I think The Blob's kind of one of the most interesting movie monsters because it has such a spotty. It's it barely has an impact. It really has had kind of barely an impact. The first one's okay. It's got it's a good idea. It's a blob. It's a blob. Yeah,
exactly.
But one of my favorite movies is the 80s. Version is the Chuck Russell, Frank Darabont.
The whole body horror kind of stuff in it is great. Yeah.
Well, it's finally when that technology caught up to what the horror. You watch the original, and it's just this little ball, a weird gooey soccer ball that's rolling around and slightly getting bigger. Whereas this one, it's eating, it's flesh eating, it's gooey. It's so shocking. To show someone it now, it's still a thing that people go, oh shit, that's intense.
Yes.
Such horrifying imagery.
Yeah, I do have a soft spot for the 80s one, I have to admit. But this one, Beware the Blob, it's got pretty sure it's the guy. I want to hopefully got the actor's name right, but I'm pretty sure it's Meredith Burgess. Is in a scene that Larry Hagman's in as well. They're not the main characters, but they're together in it, and I'm just like, how do you rope Meredith Burgess into doing this? Yeah.
Hey, you know,
I'm
kids got to go to
half
private
an
school,
hour
I guess.
off the end of it, and I'm like, oh, this is painful, but I'm sticking to it.
Okay, no, so we do have a Renfield character. It is the real estate boss.
So he was the guy that we saw with the big
who was
eyebrow,
creepy as hell. Yeah, the guy who already looked evil.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. And so, we've just had the subtitle come in of saying, you know, that his influence on the real estate agent has already taken place.
Okay.
Now we get him in the in his insane asylum.
Yes. 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 This bit. Yes. Even that, I love that. Great image. Like, I get it. Swanny flash.
He looks like a cartoon character.
He does. He really does. And this guy on the right, look at him.
Amazing. Mustache askew. I do say that is maybe easily my favorite. My favorite scene of the Dracula Dead and Loving It is the Renfield's fly scene.
Yes.
It's just another one of those ideas that is so good, of this whole thing of like this possessed person that feeds off like insects.
Yes.
Of small life, of these little souls. That is how kind of stark raving mad that they've gone.
Yeah.
That they their boss drinks human blood and they're allowed to eat little. It's such a power move.
No. Yeah, you can't have the good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Not top shelf. And I mean, Peter McNichol, I think is so fantastic in that role.
Yes.
It's because it's such a fun role. It's so.
It is an interesting character. It really is a really, really interesting character, the Renfield character. And in the Francis Ford Coppola version, obviously, it's Tom Waits that plays the Renfield character. And I find him interesting because his voice is so gravelly, which kind of adds another tone. What I love about this version we're watching here is the science part that we were just talking over it. But this kind of era really tries to explain the science behind the reason behind these creatures of the dead, creatures of the night, I should say, sorry, and the Nosferatu, and the feeding off, how spiders feed off their flies and stuff, and and we had images of the Venus flytrap and stuff that was going on in the background as an example of plant life that feeds off blood.
Omnivorous. God, look at that imagery. The beach with just the crucifixes.
That's so cool. How do you come? There's pockets of these little things that come in this film that you just go, what is it? How would you come up with that idea? It's such a cool shot.
And something that I'm so aware of, and something that when I kind of maybe show someone these kind of relics of another time is like something that I try and impress upon people who don't seem, who are like, who kind of take it for granted. It's that these things are like the first thing to do this.
Yes.
Like,
yes,
you're literally, you might be a bit spoiled by watching a million rip-offs and parodies and pale comparisons. But these, you're watching the thing. There was nothing like that before this thing.
Exactly.
That did it so well that people have been aping them for 100 years.
Yeah, so cool. I've gone quiet again because that's just where he comes back. That's right. This is where Hutter's reunited. Is that right? Oh no. The news.
It's his letter.
The news that he's well. That's right. Yeah, because she's been like lamenting by the coast. Look at that hair. Awesome.
Yeah, no, this is the letter that he sent
way back
while things were still good.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure, there's these same conversations happen. The mosquitoes are a terrible nuisance. Bit me on the neck. quite close together. That's great.
Yeah.
So great.
Just like, is he mad? What's he talking about? Mosquitoes.
It's the whole conversation of like how like mobile phones, cell phones, kind of ruined horror in a certain way.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that I don't think that's fine. I've not had service plenty of times.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm sure that conversation was happening.
Trope, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's because I mean we're watching like the communication delay of letters, and I'm sure people probably said that when telephones came in, and you know, like this kind of quickening of communication. It's kind of an interesting thing that people are still kind of figuring out at the moment of how to really make that work in horror without just being like, oh, you're in a dead spot, or like, you know, how do you include that, which I think Get Out did a pretty great job of it. Where it was this thing where it just the phone kept on being not plugged in because of like it kept on being unplugged from the charger, so it was getting less and less and less and less.
Yeah, that's it.
Until it ran out, and it, you know, that is like an anxiety that we all have of being like, oh, like I'm going out, my phone's not charged. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, that great. The biggest fear that society has now. I forgot what I was going to add to that. You were tap into it. You were saying something else
about communication. You know, cell phones.
Yeah. Oh, it was just about the phone stuff. It's like you know, with the found footage thing. Like the trope is obviously because everything's got to be filmed by a cameraman, right? So how do you capture everything? Like you always have the camera full, but it's always at a spot that can still capture everything. So that's always been a bit of a medium. It's a bit tricky to pull off sometimes because of that. But yeah, communication. Like a lot of the times, I can't even remember what it is, what movie I've seen. But sometimes you get movies where they have to hand over their phones, so they don't they're physically denied access, and that's how they can get around not being able to communicate.
Yeah, or it drops in like a glass of water, or like it's these little things. It's an interesting. Oh, we're learning here. Our Renfield is learning about the plague that is sweeping through
Transylvania and beyond.
All of the rats, because when the dock workers unpacked, all of the rats were kind of swarming out.
That's it. I mean, that's something that's always been quite closely aligned with vampire mythology, is the infection of blood. Because essentially that's the main source of nourishment for vampire kind. But it does come across as that, you know, the plague is the reference that's been used here, and that is with great effect and associated with vampire mythology. And the movie that I remember doing it really well was Near Dark, which is a 1980s flick, which closely associated with the AIDS epidemic in that. And I thought that was actually done, like the scene with Adrian Dunbar and I've forgotten the lady's name that's in it, where he doesn't want to do a blood transfusion because he's scared he'll infect her and stuff. It's good. I think it was very well written screenwriting. So this is our I love this sequence. This is on the ship that's carrying Count Orlok back on its way to England, and we see it told from the point of view from the captain and the lieutenant or the main shipmate, as their crew members start to dwindle.
Which I might be one of my favorite elements of the Dracula story, the whole idea of the journey and the image of the ship like rolling into the dock, empty but one person.
I was. It's funny. I was just. It's like you crawled into my mind just and told me what I was thinking. Because I was just, my head went into, it'd be really cool to just do a standalone film just off the boat journey. and going into that'd be kind of cool to see that element. It's almost like a gothic horror version of And Then There Were None. Set on a boat. Yeah.
Surely there's. Well, I know that there was like a vampire movie that came out like a couple of years ago that played at Monster Fest called Blood Vessel, which I haven't seen. But I don't know whether
you're right. I have seen that and written a review of it. I actually really liked it. It does a very similar thing, actually. But
that was like more kind of exploitation-y.
Yeah, but it's good. It's done in a good way. It's got Alyssa Sutherland in it. Who people may know from the Vikings series. She's in something big coming out too. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. I'm gonna have to look at that now as well. It is a big movie, and I thought, that's her. She's obviously elevated her profile. I'll look that up while we're watching this bit. There we go. Dumping the corpses off the side of the boat. Is that the point where it's just the final two? Yeah, I think it is, because he gets his hatchet. It's like, I'm gonna go below. There you go. If I'm not back again in 10 minutes, there you go. There's a horror trope. I'm just stepping out. I may be some time. I'll be right back.
And just dopey and destitute. Yeah, and we've got our Hutter racing along on his horse.
Yeah, on his horse. Going back to the Alyssa Sutherland thing. So she's going to be in the new Evil Dead movie. Evil Dead cool. Rise. Yeah, I knew it was something pretty big. Yeah. Yeah, cool. There you go. And the rats again.
Yeah.
So we're fast approaching the 1 hour mark of the movie here.
Oh,
and this shot is probably the most iconic, if bar the final sequence. And this was the one. This is the scene that I was telling you about that I remember from the film Killing Zoe. It's all this bit here. Killing Zoe. I can't remember who directed, but it's Eric Stoltz is the main guy in it. And it's like a bank heist kind
of old mask
movie. Yeah. Oh yeah. He's post Marty McFly fame.
Almost fame.
Almost fame. Yeah, that shot as well. Like, love it. God, it made me want to go.
The hands are just so good.
The hands are so perfectly poised. Yeah. Look at that.
It's kind of
so good.
Can't even,
I feel like if I went to a costume party now, I'd want to go as Count Orlok.
That's the thing. You get the bald cap, or like if you ever shave your head, you're like, okay, I'm timing this perfectly.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's when I start to lose a bit more of this hair when I'm a bit older. Like that's it. It's on.
Did you? We've got our end of Act 3.
Act 3, yep. End of Act 4.
I mean, this is like. It's interesting, kind of looking at with the pace of it, because it really is a race back.
Yes.
And you skim through that in most Dracula adaptations. You skim through our first hour here.
Yeah.
I kind of love that it's taking. That this is where the focus is going.
Yes.
And because you can't. It's all about having like the aristocrat in the original story who can pass.
Yes.
In polite society, whereas this guy's just freaky as hell. And he's not gonna be there for super long. No. Yeah, she's up on her toes again.
Yeah, look. Hey, I had never noticed the way she walked before, and that's when she's in that translucent state, where she's doing it. I think it's a nice little touch that I'd not noticed before. But yes, you're right, and I think this is where this particular movie really harnesses on, again, going back to the novel, Bram Stoker's novel, this idea of a race against time, you know, what is really impactful in the novel, and this I think really captures it. You're constantly seeing this, and we know, and it pries or centers the idea of love, you know, first and foremost into it, and that's what places us into the heart of it and goes that we want Hada to get back in time. We know that, you know, his wife is under the influence and is possibly on the verge of certain doom if he doesn't get there in time to stop this creature from infecting her. This is Hada now, isn't it? Yeah. And there's our doomed ship.
I never saw the series, but I did read the first book in the Strain.
Yes.
In the Strain series.
Yeah.
The Guillermo del Toro collab.
Yeah, I only see. I've not read the books, and I've only seen the first season.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's been mixed reviews, but I really liked it. I really dug the first season. I liked the twists and turns it took.
It's a real shock. I remember reading the book and being super shocked in how it develops.
Yes.
And how kind of quickly it develops.
Yes.
Which is kind of super delightful, and like the riffs, because I don't know if you quite know what's happening in the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
But then you have your stand-in for the ship, with the aeroplane.
Yes.
That is completely empty and that it seems to be full of darkness.
Yeah.
Which I was such a great, like, kind of more terrifying version of it. Because like a ship can come in on the wind or on the, you know, I mean, obviously there's a lot more to it, but a plane is like, there's a lot more, you know, like it's
it's relying on that gravity is always going to win, and there was I recently have been anyone that's been following the Surgeons of Horror reviews online, I've been recently looking at Wes Craven's later years and writing up stuff to do with that, and I kicked it off with the famous Eddie Murphy Fest, Vampire in Brooklyn, which also has the ship moment coming in, but it kind of crash lands in the dock in that instance.
It's an odd film, that one.
It's a weird one. If it wasn't for Angela Bassett in it, it would be quite forgettable. There's
I think it's probably, you know, it's one of those films that just suffer because of the star, because of like the like, and not that, you know, I love Eddie Murphy, but it's the thing of like when the star is bringing in an element of a persona that has to inject humor or comedy or, you know.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. Well, the biggest problem is like Eddie Murphy was trying to shake his comedy roots, right, to do something a bit more serious, and Craven was trying to shake off his horror roots to do something a bit more serious and a bit more light-hearted, and the producers were wanting Craven to do more horror, and they were also wanting Murphy to do more comedy. So you get these two creatives trying to break the mold that has formed them. I'm sorry, going back to what we watched, I just love the way that he's carrying around his own coffin around.
Yeah, 100%. And absolutely, I just realized Phantasm, a riff in Phantasm of the tall man.
Yes.
Easily carrying a coffin by itself, like just under his arm.
Yeah. I'd forgotten that. Did you and I talk about Phantasm? Was that you and I that did that?
No. I watched the first one for the first time last year at some point.
Oh, I love it. I got so hooked on that series of films. They're just Just when you think they can't get any more batshit crazy, they do.
Oh man, the whole I think I just read, or I read shortly after, Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Ah, yes.
The Ray Bradbury story that the director was basically making. He wanted to make that story.
Yeah.
Of stranger who comes to the strange carnival. This bizarre people. He's made it. He
got home. He got home. That's right. And now Nosferatu's trying to set up digs somewhere. That's cool. So what were we talking about? Sorry, got distracted there. We were talking about something else. Oh, something something wicked this way comes, and
Phantasm,
that's right. Oh, that's right. Don Coscarelli directed that, and I rewatched Bubba Hotep recently because that's 20 years old this year, which I cannot believe.
Whoa.
Yeah. And it's not a perfect film, but I love it. I love it so much. It's right up my alley. And yeah, I equally loved watching it this time round.
Great. Funnily enough, a horror comedy that certainly leans into its comedy a lot more.
Yeah. I mean, some of the jokes are fall a bit flat, but I
think when you've got that I think when you've got the concepts and the performers, it doesn't matter. That's when it doesn't really matter if not every joke works. It's it's still just funny to think about it.
Yeah. I'm sorry. That shot just there, we kind of, for the weird first time ever, we're an hour and 5 minutes, we see him almost walk through a wall, almost like a phantom passing through the wall, which was obviously done in cross dissolve in order to do it, but it's the first time we kind of get this image of him being able to kind of pass through physical barrier. And this is where we see that we're starting to get people discovering the dead crew of the boat or the ship that came in. I'm not a living soul on board, sir. One thing it doesn't touch on here is in a lot of adaptations that have touched on the Dracula storyline is that the Dracula takes on a form of a beast to get off the boat, whereas we don't see Orlak just strolls off with his carry on coughing.
And I mean, and obviously, I think one of the things that that you clock a bit is figuring out when is night and when is not night.
Yes.
Because obviously, black and white, early days, that's but also that's one of the things that, understanding the context is this is important.
Yes.
This is an element that you just kind of have to go with.
Yeah. I'm just looking up on stuff to do with Max Schreck in the background here because
Max Schreck, of course, one of the many villains of Batman Returns, portrayed by Christopher Walken. He plays Max Schreck of Schreck Industries. And he is literally straight. Burton's obviously a massive fan of German expressionism, and he has drawn quite a lot. Most of his characters have, they've got the dark eyes, the dark big eyes, and even Christopher Walken's hair in that one. It's the white. It's kind of the shock of white. He looks like Renfield. He looks like Renfield. He
does.
And the teeth. The teeth. Oh no! Now I'm getting Sleepy Hollow mixed up with this.
No, that's the guy. I'm with you, though, but you're right. It's he has.
Christopher Walken would have absolutely thrived in the silent era.
Oh God, yeah.
It's
just had
interesting
that.
watching. Yeah, these filmmakers who have this appreciation and will like, some of the actors that they work with because they're like, oh, you missed out. You missed out on like, obviously you're incredible and you're a legend, but like you missed out on being one of the great pioneers. Because talking nonsense. Yeah, it's Max Shrek. But I know nothing about the actor.
Yeah, I just was literally, I thought, I should look up, because like he's obviously known purely for this, but he was very heavily involved with the expressionist scene and worked a lot with Bertolt Brecht's kind of stuff.
Right.
Well. So that kind of real stripped down, kind of minimalist kind of performance.
Really interesting. Really interesting, the pairing of those two.
Yeah.
Of expressionism, which is the end, almost the antithesis of Brecht.
Yeah.
Brecht's theater methodology of the pull, without the frills. It's no frills theater.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. And then he would then go on to like make this film, which kind of launched him in many, many ways. But then the copyright infringement that kind of came around by Florence Stoker, you were correct, was Bram Stoker's wife at the time. Kind of forced him into back scenes a little bit and away from the prying eye. Although he would work with Murnau again in, and I'm going to try and pronounce this right, the Finanzen das Große Zogs, which is the Grand Duke's finances. That was like 2 years afterwards. He did act in films, but just kind of didn't do a massive amount beyond this particular role, and he died in 1936 from a heart failure.
Oh wow.
So what's that, like only 14 years after this was released? Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. The imagery, like how heavily the plague imagery, because obviously, you're not going to have all of these. I mean, you're obviously not going to have these big dialogue scenes with lots of characters. It's all about imagery. It's the image of the the plaguesman walking around marking the crucifixes
on the door. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
On the door, the whole idea that that the plague is, that this truly is a plague and that is sweeping through, and it's just his influence. And because I don't even know if there's the implication that he's doing this. I think whether this is just the plague the plague of death.
Yeah, the plague of death that comes with it. Yeah,
it comes with him. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. It's interesting, isn't it? There was a thing I watched that I found really fascinating around the plague, and that I'm pretty sure it was like one of these like cities, underworld cities or something like that, and it's all like, because modern cities are generally built on top of the old ones, and I'm pretty sure this one in Edinburgh, and it was talking about the plague, and they literally Edinburgh is kind of on a hill essentially in Scotland, and they basically kind of built over it and shut everyone off, the poor people off, basically boxed them in, and let them kind of die essentially. And so horrible things, but that's how they just shut them out, like boxed everything up, and like that's how we'll deal with it, sweep it under the carpet. And people have gone under there now to kind of discover this underworld city where people were trying to thrive and live like under the ground essentially, to really horrible times. Yeah, and this is again kind of like echoing what's happening here. It's like, this plague-ridden stuff that's going on. Here's our
Well, we've got
character.
one of my favorite kind. I do love my horror tropes.
Yes.
And I love my trope of person who reads the book, of someone who reads the book and they've got the information.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny that it is often like a feminine character. That it is that even now, this early on, when like obviously 1922, women are still, are not like free citizens by any stretch, but still, it's like the idea of like the old fashioned idea of the fairer sex this identification of this character who is tapped into it all. She's tapped into the visions of her love. She's tapped into the horrors of this character. She's reading this book. She's this kind of this character who's on it, and without her we'd be doomed.
Yeah, it is interesting. I'm wondering if it's to do with, and we're looking through the lens of the time it was set or was made, that it was deemed that women were the fairer sex, and because they're deemed that, were a bit more empathetic and closer to the idea of the heart, which is closer to the human soul, and because of that are in tune with being knowledgeable, because they're able to adapt and understand these things far greater than man can, because man is all about action and going out and earning a living and doing the physical brawn side of things, which isn't associated with the heart. So that's the way that the female is the one that would need to be able to understand if there is an element of humanity even in the darkest recesses of the world. Then they are the ones that will be able to understand that more so than man would. Or all of that I said could just be bullshit.
Totally. I think it's like I think and obviously we're two guys here talking about that.
That's the thing,
I mean, feminism and horror have obviously, like, undoubtedly had such a strong relationship that has obviously at some points been better and at a lot of points certainly been worse. But in terms of like looking at roles for women, like some of the greatest kind of crowning mainstream interesting roles have been your horrors. You have been these elevated genres that have kind of gone, that are talking about these really deep things. You look at Sigourney Weaver in Alien with all of its kind of like sexual, violent sexual imagery, or like Carrie with your 2-year-olds, like winning the Academy Award, like really being really being kind of recognized and nominated and talking about sexual repression. There's a lot of, it's all because and horror is about repression. It's about the this thing under the skin that's bursting forward, the dam's breaking. It's very interesting.
It is. Like women in horror, like particularly in horror, have particularly the final girl character often has that chance to play a great range, because they have the opportunity to do so. And like that's why we get the iconic characters, like you said, the Ellen Ripleys, the Laurie Strodes,
They're active characters. And because they're this final character, even for the bad ones, when your last character, when your main character is going to be alive until the end, they're gonna get to do a lot of stuff, and it's the real tied kind of thing for I know for a lot of actors, like during acting school, you'd look at my female classmates would be looking for good scenes or good monologues, and it's just like, oh, prostitute, wife, like it's all of these, like so many of the roles in in drama and this, it's like if they want to make a female role interesting, have made it something that falls into one of those weird boxes. Whereas horror elevates itself from that, because a lot of the time it will just be them alive, and it'll be them alive because of their awareness of their mind, of their action, of their ability and strength of character and of body. It's and I think it is this cool thing that when people haven't watched a lot of horror, and it's really fun kind of showing some women that I know that obviously a lot of them have seen these things. These are big movies, but like people who have gaps will watch these things and be like, whoa, like what the hell? Like this is crazy. It's like, this is like early 70s. Like this is, something that they're not aware of because of this kind of slew of mainstream media, and where that focus kind of gets planted, and where the majority of people, because horror fans come in all genders, all sexes, all so kinds.
True. So true. I watched an interview with Dave Grohl recently, and he was talking about that more so from a music perspective, of how music can touch, the same kind of piece of music can touch many different walks of life, and horror does the same kind of thing in many ways, where you could have a wide range of people that will be drawn to the subjects of horror. This is the other iconic shot here with our Count Orlok looking out the window, trying to use his telepathic skills
to reach out with the mind.
Come, Zamir. Come, Zamir.
Now, this moment coming up is the moment that put all of us in year 8 in stitches.
Yes.
And became quite an active meme for I think at least a year.
Right.
Which is and I mean, this is one of the first scenes that the only scenes that we saw, which is, I mean, show them the whole movie. Show them the whole movie. I get it.
Not? Let's do it.
It's coming up right here. It's him walking away with the hands raised.
Yeah. Oh, that one. Yes. Yes. I can so picture that too as a year 8 boy.
Yeah. Hands up. Yeah.
It's so good. No.
Yeah, this is it. There it is. But, yeah. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. So we're coming up to the closing kind of part of our film at the moment. Hard to believe. And the iconicness of the final image, which will be with us in due course. And you can tell by the way that we're going silent again here, because we're kind of gripped by this. I think it's a very cool, iconic ending. When we get to that point, I mean, obviously, it's the sunlight through the window bit, but it's one that's been oft repeated, often in animations that will rift off that kind of frozen and then kind of disintegrated kind of perspective. Where does he go to get help from a doctor at this point? I've forgotten. Sorry, the other character.
Bulwark.
I love that shot.
Yeah.
Gosh, the shadows. Like often, there's sometimes. Look at that. This.
Yeah.
This is so beautiful.
Just man, I mean, they really knocked it out of the park.
They did.
They should be very proud of themselves.
Yeah.
I think Max Schreck may not have done that much for the rest of his life, but
no,
this is a good one to have.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This bit, there's this. Like, and then going over the heart, and that, I mean, it's theatrics at its best, right? You know. Oh yes, that's right. So he's gone to get the doctor. I thought so. I was trying to remember why he wasn't there anymore. Yeah.
She tells him. She told him, go get him.
That's right.
Which, like, I don't know why you're doing that. I guess he's our like Van Helsing character. He's the one, the scientist.
Go get that mad guy that knows about blood.
Yeah, so creepy. The way that they use shadow here.
Yeah. It's predatory. You know, it's that. You know, we had the image of the spider earlier, and it's almost like the spider waiting in the corner.
Its eyes. It's the eyes of like the tiger in the shrubs. It's like this. It's this thing that's about to pounce.
So good.
The image of the rooster. I mean, that's like. Yeah, that's your symbol.
I'm just wondering, is that also like a bit of a biblical reference there too? You know, the whole kind of Peter and Jesus thing. There's a whole thing in the Bible where Jesus prophesies that Peter will denounce him, and Peter's like, "No, I'd never do that." And he goes, "You will. It'll be at the third crow of the cock in the morning, or something or other." So it's that signal of like, I don't know. Again, I could be talking bullshit here again.
Like the just like it's the tolling of the bells.
Yeah. It's that whole kind of like, you know, it's the fine balance of good and evil, essentially dark and light, day and night happening. Again, here
just seeing the light come through there.
Yeah. It's like, fuck, I'm buggered now, aren't I?
He's just screwed it.
Oh, God, and timed that wrong. Yeah, he goes to this bit here, that whole... So good. There. It's coming back to that theatrics again. Quick crosses out, and he's like, shit. I've lost my master.
Being cut loose. Master is dead.
Does he die too? Is that alluding to death?
I think
power over him is gone. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you're like, well, he just kind of died. It's like the Indiana Jones thing. They're like, still, the same story happens even if the protagonist hasn't done anything. They haven't really influenced it. She still got jumped on.
Yeah. I got you, my love. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think they did need the doctor.
And like she dies at the end there too, yeah? Because she has also become because technically I think Olak had bitten her.
Yes.
So, and feasted on her, so with his death comes her death, which, you know, not a happy ending. He's looking a bit drunk.
It certainly like adds. I know that there were a few places that this was banned for decades.
Yes. And there's our closing caption. Oh, we're going to get lots of ads now over the top of the imagery. And the image of the castle at the end. Wow. There you go. I'll stop sharing the screen so that we can just have our beautiful selves again. Yeah, wow, that was a good ride. In going through that again,
Right.
and I'd only just semi-watched it recently, as part of my like retrospective. So it was kind of semi-fresh in my mind. When was the last time you had watched it through there, Oscar?
I'd never watched it.
Oh,
Never
you
watched
hadn't
it
watched it. I've
all the
forgotten
way
that.
through.
Thank you.
Only scenes, only some scenes.
That's right. How was? I mean, I know we were talking over the top of it, but what was your general take of it coming out?
Well, I think silent movies are kind of some of the best to talk over because
yeah.
you're not missing any dialogue.
Oh well, that's what I liked about it. I often would deliberately grab black and white silent films when I was hosting parties, and I would just stick them on in the TV. You'd have people's general music that tastes playing in the background too, but it was a visual eye candy, just a kind of conversation piece to go, oh, what's that? You know?
Yeah, I've been to a few bars in Melbourne that will do that. They'll chuck on the public domain kind of thing, and I love that as just as just like an extension of the atmosphere of like feeling like that's cool. But I mean I loved it. I mean, like, it's good. It's really good. It's so like it's so it's so emotional. It's really romantic, and you know, I mean, it's, you know, like
it is very romantic, and I think that's what lends to the original Gothic romantic literature.
And even like, I mean, even in a lot of the Dracula kind of adaptations that I've had that I have seen, the relationship and the romance has always felt incredibly English to me. It's, you know, it's the repression versing the kind of the destruction of that. Whereas with this, like, I mean, you're dealing with silent era, you're dealing with you know, Weimar, like post World War I Germany, that is like so like kind of so emotional and so like creative, and so you're getting these like you know, he's diving in and he's catching her the moment before she dies. Like real kind of great epic thing. I've really loved it, and it's like
I mean, like we've already seen like the precursor to her death is the bit where we see the shadowy hand crush her heart, right? So we kind of know like that's her done, right? And so I think, and there's a lot of poetic imagery used in this version, which really translates nicely, and I think because it was born out of the silent era, enhances those images even more so, because that was the medium that they had to speak through, and we had someone in F.W. Murnau who knew that craft. There's a lot of stuff comes out of it, and like the other big director was Fritz Lang, that came out of the German Expressionist era, and I'm a huge fan of Fritz Lang's imagery. And so when I watch something like Nosferatu, you can see that whole German Expressionist era molded together, and beautiful. And I'm a big fan of that era, and that especially the silent era, German Expressionism, late 20s, early 30s. Oh well, I think it's so good. And so it's quite good,
fertile ground.
And that's right, and that's echoing what you were saying earlier, you know, or to repeat what you said earlier. This is stuff being created for the very first time, and we're seeing pioneers of the craft really playing with the medium, and these are examples of it at its best, in the birth of film, essentially. And the iconic scenes that kind of come out of it, the imagery that comes out of it. James Wan is now one of the most successful film directors / producers in Hollywood at the moment. His directed films is all about light and shadow. Every film he does, and he's probably one of the best directors, modern directors, that can play with that really well. And we're going back to this kind of stuff. The pioneers of the craft really creating this stuff, and we're still seeing it now today. Like I said, the likes of Wan, it's really, really cool. So I was just having a quick look at the obviously it became huge and the legacy that surrounded it of the film itself. And a weird way in the fact that it got because it got sued, and as you said, all the original films were burnt or disintegrated in some way, shape, or form, and only pieced together by secondhand kind of material that was available, and kind of bring this thing together again. Because it had resonated with its audience on its original release, that we're fortunate there were people that weren't willing to let that go, despite the backlash that came around with it. And it's interesting to see it survive because of that, despite the damage that was given to it. It's a film that, like Count Orlok, was able to live after death and come back and haunt cinema goers even to this present day. Like, there are modern going audiences that this won't appeal to. They're not interested in the silent era, but from a celluloid film history point of view, it is probably one of the most poignant and relevant movies that should definitely be resurrected whenever we can, to watch it as its intention. I mean, and we're watching it like a beautiful, pristine version of it, as we were saying. I can't remember if that was on our record or not, but beautifully pristine version created in Blu-ray HD, and we're streaming it. But it would be beautiful to see that on the big screen with an organist playing the music. Like, I love that stuff. I mean, I live for the nostalgic element that comes out of going to the cinema anyway, and I love to see the birth of these things as it's created. And yeah, I do. I slip into this nostalgic kind of sense of watching these films and wallow in it. And I know you were talking about people look at some of these eras and these changes in the acting of the time, but with every weak performance, there's great performances here. And sure, the guy that plays Hutter is hamming it up like there is no tomorrow, but that adds to the energy and the heart of the film as a juxtaposition against the way Count Orlok is on the screen with Max Schreck's performance. It's
also to say
balance.
like a modern performance would not work at all for these movies. Like, my God, you'd have no idea what was going on. And like, that's part of it. They're communicating so much that, you're getting their body language turned up to 21.
Yeah.
And getting like all of that, it's I know it's like it's a weird and obvious thought to have, of being like, like, obviously you got your title cards, but you can follow along without that. Like, you can. And that's how strong the visual storytelling is. And it's something that I think a lot of modern directors for decades have not paid attention to. And it's like, you can tell a great movie when you can turn off the sound and you can follow what's happening. Maybe not the exact context, but you can tell what is happening because of the visual language, not just the performances, but the shot composition, the lighting, the mood, the editing, the pacing. It's something that there are still great lessons to be learnt from these films that are very recently 100 years old, which is insane to think about.
It is really insane. And like, I only just a couple of years back, we just had the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari as well, which is another German early German expressionist film, which reached its centenary milestone. But I mention that purely again because the visual components that's in that film is amazing, and this in that movie there's a lot of sharp kind of imagery too, like this real overemphasis of the light and dark the white and the black and these protruding images that come through is really cool. And I just find that I am always enveloped in these films, and I think that's part of their appeal, and that's why they still resonate today. Yeah, and this is like, I'm just semi reading over. There's a critic, Roger Ebert had kind of was talking about this film, and it kind of emphasizes again what you were saying about this predates what we know of Dracula. You know, this is before all the cliches and the jokes and stuff that surround it. You know, this is it, the story at its core. And even like Lugosi, like you watch the Lugosi flick, and that was like what we know as we said, that the true image of the gentleman kind of character of Dracula. But because of his accent, it's also the one that then gets riffed a lot. And you know, without seeing his voice on the screen for Nosferatu, we don't know what he sounds like. But that adds to that mystique that surrounds this kind of interesting entity that's going around like the plague, killing off these victims, you know. And there's that, and also like what it does tap into, again, going into the telekinesis and telepathy, component of his character. He's also embedded in Stoker's Dracula 2, and the lure that Dracula has over his intended victims, and that really relates really well with the you know, the female character in Nosferatu in a big way, the Greta character. So I always call it Greta because the actress is called Greta. It's Ellen. Ellen. Yeah. But yeah, like that whole kind of, you know, and you were talking about space. What is space? Space is infinite, but you know what lies between that. There's matter in there, you know, and substance, and it's that connection that we can have.
All, yeah, these lines that connects us all, that there is more, you know, it's more than what we just see. Exactly. Which is what, you know, that's where the fun is.
It is. So I mean, like we've just kind of walked through and we've talked through it, and I realized that, you know, we're probably, well, the movie itself is an hour and a half, so I don't want to overextend our welcome too much. We've just had the our commentary run, but before we bow out, and I always ask this in our podcast, is like, would you recommend this film to someone who has never seen it before? Or does that come with its own portion?
You know what? I probably wouldn't if someone's like, I need a real, you know, like I want to have like a Friday night watch of something. Like, what do you recommend? Nosferatu probably isn't. Probably I would say it would probably be on brand for me as a person. I don't think people would be too surprised, but I it wouldn't be the one that I would immediately go to. But if it was playing in a cinema, if they were doing a screening, 100%.
Yes.
If you know, like, I think it's great watching it as we are, and I think there's so much to enjoy from it. But I think you really hit on it of being like, you got to see this on the big screen.
I think you do. Like that was the medium it was made for, and I think because it is a visual spectacle, I think to really experience that is to watch it the way it was intended, and that was on a big screen. And I get great joy watching it on my little screen here at home, but I think if I saw it playing in a screen somewhere, I would be like, oh damn, I need to go check that out for sure. But we're talking this from the point of view of horror fans and cinephiles across the mean. It would be interesting. It steps into that. I know I'm kind of throwing myself a little bit under the bus with this comment, because I did say how I love watching or putting these things on when I am entertaining in the background, but it equally could fall into wankdom in doing that kind of activity, like you know, and I'm aware of that pitfall to my idea, because it does smack of like, you know, come over, have some cocktails, and we'll talk about politics and highbrow stuff, and I'll just stick this on in the background just to kind of elevate my profile a little bit. Yeah.
On brand. You go through, it's like putting on some music.
Yes.
Cinephiles like putting on movies in the background.
That's exactly it. It does. Cool. Well, on that note, I probably should say thank you for joining us for our discussions today, Oscar, on Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror, for its centenary celebrations. Have absolutely enjoyed hearing your musings along the way too, as you always do, bring some great gold to our conversations, and I'm all the more thankful for you joining me.
Oh, thank you very much, Saul. It has been a dark, stormy evening, which is my favorite kind of evening.
It has been, and it's been quite fitting for watching a Gothic film at home, I think. But there you go, because here in Australia we are getting pummeled by rain. Yeah, it's been quite. You know, it feels like we're going from one thing to another. You know, if it's not COVID, if it's not the fires from 2 years ago, it's now the floods that have come. Yeah, crazy times. So do stay safe. We hope you're staying safe out there. Look after yourselves during these times. And if you get the opportunity to check out some of our further stuff, do go out and listen to more of our podcasts at surgeonsofhorror.com. Until then, I am your host, Saul Muerte, as always. And once again, thank you, Oscar. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.